morning again, everyone. Want to welcome you all, anybody watching us at home. I talked to so many people this week that were under the weather. It's the unfortunate part of this year. I always want the holidays to be like in May and June. It just never quite lines up. So you have festive occasions, but sick season as well. So hope you are all feeling well and keeping your families healthy. Wanted to say two things really before we dive in. One, I brought my phone out here today because I'm checking my team. No, I'm not doing that. I'm looking here at my phone because some of you may or may not have the Bible app. We haven't talked about that in a while. This is a free service. It's done by YouVersion. I'm sorry I don't have a slide for you. Literally wanted to do this 10 seconds ago. Not time to give our tech team info. But just on your iPhone, Android, if you download it's called the YouVersion Bible app. It's my favorite tool, actually, out there online. Made sure Lisa and the kids have it on their phones. But you would just go in to that app, and then at the bottom it says More, and you would go to Events, and if your phone's got your location on, it'll find Christ Fellowship, and all of the message notes are on that app. Even quotes, that don't make it into the message, things that come out of, my reading or whoever's doing the message, their reading and prep are on there. Some of you have told me it's been a very helpful tool and said you haven't mentioned that for a while. So it's the YouVersion Bible. Again, if you use that, it's not a paid thing, it's a free thing. We don't get anything of it other than just inviting people to go a little deeper into the scripture, which is a joy to do. Second is a little more practical for us today. At the end of our time, we are going to be taking communion together as Russ mentioned. And always like to say, if you're here today and you're visiting, this might sound weird. I want to take away any pressured feeling you may have to participate if you're not sure where you stand regarding the person of Jesus Christ. If that's you, nothing makes us more thrilled that you would take your valuable time and come here today to, I believe, open up your mind to what God has to say to you about his son. But please feel no pressure to take communion. A lot of people don't. A lot of children don't. And the Bible is actually very clear on this. It's a meal for those that would call Jesus Savior and Lord. So I encourage people, because I've talked to people about this. Well, what do you do during the time? So just take some time to think about what you've heard, process it, think about it. Maybe ask yourself, why are these people around me so enthralled with this person of Jesus Christ? All right, can't wait to dive back in now with you into what is essentially a preamble to our December series, His Name Shall Be Called. And I know you're thinking, wait, it's not Thanksgiving yet. I know, but we're 101.9 is already playing the music. My buddy Al Myers texted me and said, hey, you know it's on? Of course, I already knew it because I was there. And of course, if you love Jesus, you know you like Christmas music before Thanksgiving. And if you love him, but not as much as you should, you wait until after Thanksgiving. The Bible's very, very clear on that distinction. I'm the only one in my house that feels that way, so I have to put my AirPods in and play the music I want to listen to. They don't even bother asking me what I'm listening to because they already know. So I don't know where you are on that front. I heard some grumblings when I even joked about that just here in the last 30 seconds. But I thought I'd ask a question that'll take us into a text that is necessary to understand Christmas, but rarely does anybody ever talk about it. We love Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6. We don't as much love what comes before. So I want to set this question up for us before celebrating Christmas. Why do we need it? We certainly have enough on our calendars. We certainly are busy people. If you pull out your calendar on your smartphone, I bet it's pretty full. Or you're that person saying, yeah, I need to fill it up so I don't keep forgetting appointments, etc. That's more me. But why do we need it in the first place? That's what's buzzing around in my mind this morning. And I want to invite you to take a step into this world with me and maybe ask yourself, hey, whether I'm a Christmas person that's all about the sentimentality and the pizzazz, or I kind of look for December 26th for life to get normal again, I just want to use this next few weeks and ask, why do we need it in the first place? So I want to go to a passage that was written over 700 years before Jesus was born. Now, even if you're not a religious person, you've probably heard the 6th verse quoted, but there's 5 that come before it. And I understand why they never make greeting cards and Christmas specials are made out of them. There's some names here that I'm probably going to butcher, but I'm going to say it confidently so you'll think that's the proper way to pronounce them. That's what I learned. When you have a weak point, shout louder and say it with swagger. That's how you can get into a backstage pass at a Duran Duran concert. But story for another day. Let me go right in. Isaiah chapter 9, verse 1. This is how this servant of God named Isaiah, a truth teller, describes something that's going to happen in the coming days. There will be, its future, no gloom for her who was in anguish in the former time. He brought into contempt the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. Now, I know that's everybody's life verse, right? Everybody says my life, Isaiah 9:1. I'd love to be at a small group and somebody say that. That Isaiah 9:1 is my life verse, just to see people's reactions. The no gloom, but what's all the Zebulun, Naphtali stuff? This is how this famous Christmas passage starts. And like you, I'm the same way, unless I study and prep for it. I'm kind of thinking, I don't know what to do with that. But I want you to notice, when you get a message that there will be no more gloom, that's not a meaningful message unless you're experiencing gloom. Right? It would be like if you got a call from your doctor or your doctor's office. The doctor's never going to call you, but their support staff, their ancillary team, and they call you up and say, hey, good news, Mrs. So-and-so, Mr. So-and-so, insert your name. We got the test results back, and you are good to go. They were negative. You're probably thinking, when did I have a test? Right? Like if you just get a call with a good piece of news, but there was no prior bad news, that call's not particularly meaningful. Last year in our family, I'll just say that, we had a pretty significant scare, and Lisa and I just prayed about it. We just said, well, a bunch of tests have been done. We're going to see. We found out that we were going to get the news of the results on December the 23rd. So we thought, well, this is going to be an interesting Christmas season for us. And we asked the Lord to prepare our hearts to respond either way. The Lord was going to will it to occur, because we do not believe as Christians that look at the Bible honestly with intellectual honesty that we don't suffer and experience pain. You know that from experience. I know that from experience, and the Bible confirms it in its truthful declaration. And we got the call that the news was good, for which we were quite thankful. This is the tone here. There will be no more gloom, meaning right now or soon there's going to be gloom. It's going to be hard. It's going to be dark. Now notice Isaiah here personifies, he says, for her who was in anguish. And that's the way, the often people call their cars, by a personal name, or a ship is often christened and it's a she, etc. Boats are called she. These are the kind of sentiments that speak of a personification. This is what's happening here. And the nation is the nation of Israel, of course, Isaiah's beloved people. Now, let me give you a statement with a lot of 10-cent names that I said I'm going to be bold with. Just tell you the background of this. Let's go to the next passage here I've got up from the book of 2 Kings. This describes historically what would happen to the region, Naphtali and Zebulun in the north of Israel. In the days of Pekah, king of Israel, Tiglath-Pileser, parents, if you're looking for prospective names, king of Assyria, came and captured Ijon, Abel, Beth-Maachah, Genoa, Kadesh, Hazor, Gilead, and notice Galilee, all the land of Naphtali, and he carried the people captive to Assyria. So there is a time in Israel's history where Tiglath-Pileser, who would, to our ears today, would be like saying Adolf Hitler. He was an enemy of God's people. Tiglath-Pileser came and he brought a campaign of destruction, and virtually destroyed the northern kingdom of Israel. It's made up of 10 tribes. And I want you to notice Galilee and Naphtali are specifically mentioned. That's going to become very important for the Christmas story, very important for us at this time of year. To just step back and think about it a little bit. And this is what happened. Now, I know everybody woke up today and they wanted this. We'll go to the next slide. I know everybody wanted one of these maps. Thank you. You're like, I need a map. People, just a quick aside, are we really going seeker sensitive when I put that map up there? Long story for another day. Now, Isaiah 9, 1 through 2. There will be no gloom for her who was in anguish. In the former time, he brought into contempt the land of Zebulun and Naphtali, and I've circled those regions at the top so you can see where they are. This is the area that's going to be, I don't like to say decimated. That's become a euphemism, but that just means 10% of the population is lost, if you get technical. They were obliterated virtually by this campaign of Tiglath-Pileser. That's what Isaiah is describing here in these opening words, which is why it never makes a Christmas special. And just for good measure, you want another map. So I'm going to give it to you on the next slide. There you go. A little clearer perhaps on this one. In about 720 BC, the mighty empire of Assyria would mainly obliterate the northern kingdom of Israel, and they would repopulate it with non-Jewish people. So, fill in the blank here. You say, well, I can't relate to that, I know. So picture any disaster movie that you've seen. One of the best ones, by the way, that I've seen in recent years, it kind of a box office sleeper, was a movie called The Impossible. Did anybody see that with Ewan McGregor? Wow. Me and no one. Nobody saw it? You saw it, John? Thank you. Remember that, Ewan McGregor? And it was about the floods in Indonesia. Yes, the tidal wave that happened about, 10 or 15 years ago. It was massive destruction. Tens of thousands of people died. I'd highly recommend the movie. So parents, don't yell at me if there's a scene in there or two. Just check it out on one of the Christian review sites and use your judgment. But Lisa and I saw it, and we were moved because the destruction was just so sweeping, and quite literally in that movie. Just families ripped apart. I remember there's a scene where Ewan McGregor, when things are finally settling down, calls his parents and just describes what's happened, and he's kept himself so cool and so calm and so solid through the whole thing, and when he's on the phone, he simply just says, yeah, hey, Dad, yeah, and then the waters came and swept us all away. And he can't finish his thought. Once he's finally stepped back, it's the destruction is unspeakable. This is what Isaiah is describing. This is something you and I have probably never experienced living in the good old U.S. in the early part of the 21st century or the end of the 20th. People that go to war may have had a taste of this, but this is what's going to happen. So Isaiah says, I want to look beyond that. Let's go to the next piece here. I want to look beyond that because, yes, right now we've been brought into contempt. That's language, by the way, of divine judgment. This isn't something that happened when God turned his back. This isn't something happened when God was busy, finessing Saturn's rings. And then, oh my goodness, I didn't notice what was happening behind my back. My beloved people of Israel are suffering. No. I'd love to tell you that. It's a little more palatable for us. But the language is the language of divine judgment. This is what the nation has experienced as a result of their rebellion against the God who has formerly blessed them. Notice how the writers of ancient history describe this, again in 2 Kings. The people of Israel walked in all the sins that Jeroboam did. Jeroboam was a vile king. He was really the first king of the northern region. They did not depart from them until the Lord removed Israel out of his sight, as he had spoken by all his servants the prophets. So Israel was exiled from their own land to Assyria until this day. Israel was made up of 12 tribes. 10 of those were to the north, only 2 to the south, Judah and Benjamin. The 10 tribes were so wiped out that only the remnant that survived, they didn't maintain their ethnic identity because they intermingled and were mixed in with the larger Assyrian populations, so that by Jesus' day, no one could even trace their ancestry to one of those 10 tribes to the north. It's devastating. And the Lord had said, this is what's going to happen if you continue to clench your fist and rebel against me. Notice he said, just as my prophets, or as the prophets have spoken. Let me give you one example from the book of Joshua, who is actually considered, even though he's a military leader, he's considered one of God's prophets, which just means truth tellers. If you violate the covenant of the Lord your God, which he commanded you, and go and serve other gods and bow down to them, the Lord's anger will burn against you, and you will quickly perish from the good land he has given you. Do you see how Isaiah 9, those first couple of verses, why you see nobody wants to make a Christmas special out of them? You know, Rankin and Bass aren't going to do claymation on that. Just doesn't look good. The optics are bad. But we need to understand this. So when the call comes in that the news is good, our hearts can rise up and meet that good news and say, man, I needed to hear that. I've stolen for the title of this message a line that we sing probably every year. Well, we don't sing. We like to hear Josh Groban sing it, and then we listen along. That's what I do, because you don't want to hear me sing it. You'll notice Long Lay the World in the beautiful song, Oh Holy Night. I mean, that song just slays. In sin and error pining, and we hope our children don't ask us, Mom, what does that mean? And just do something brilliant. Say, what's a Christmas song? And pine trees. You know, just do something like that. That's how I always kind of the sleight of hand, distract them, throw out a candy cane, and they chase it like a red rubber ball. That's my Parenting 101 seminar that I drop on you today, free of charge. Pining, I actually looked it up. I looked it up in the Oxford English Dictionary, which is a great tool. You used to have to pay like, $1,000 to get that. Now you can find a lot of this online for free of charge. It's an old English word for languishing. And that grabbed my attention. I was sitting in a Starbucks, I'm going to tell you this, in late September of this past year, and it was kind of gray and cold, and I thought, oh, this reminds me of a Christmassy day. So I'm in Starbucks, and I realized people were going to think I was weird, so I put in my AirPods, and I started listening to Christmas music, because that's just how I roll. And so here I was enjoying it, and I was having my coffee, and Oh Holy Night was on, the iHeart Radio Christmas app, and I'm listening to it, and that line leapt out at me, and I thought, man, long lay the world in sin, in error, pining. Because there is where the truth of Isaiah 9 slips into even one of our beloved Christmas songs, right? This is the setup for Christmas. Why do we need it? Because for a long time, the world, not just Israel, which I submit to you is a picture, it's a microcosm of the larger picture. The world is languishing. Have you ever considered that for all of our technology, all of our education, all of our gadgets, all of our cool stuff, do you ever feel like I do that, man, it doesn't take much for the world to spin out of control? I have a good friend who, to this day, he's about 50 years old now. He and I are contemporaries. When he was 19, he worked at a TCBY yogurt. And he worked there, and he was the assistant manager, which meant he made 15 cents more an hour than the 16-year-olds there, and he got to wear a goofy hat. That's what it meant. And so here he was one night, and it's he and another girl. So my friend Brian at this time is probably about 18 or 19, and his coworker's about 16. And a guy came in on a hot August night in a long trench coat, which kind of clued him in, this is a little odd. And my friend Brian said to him, hey, we're about to close in 2 minutes. He said, I'm just going to use your restroom. And he went into the restroom and goes into that restroom. And Brian just has an instinct to put his ear against the door, and he can hear what sounds like shells being loaded into a gun. So he went out quickly, and he told his coworker, there wasn't time to do anything. He said, I'm going to need you to stay calm because I think there's a situation. And he came out. It's like a scene in a movie. You know, he wanted the money in the safe. He came out with a shotgun, and Brian got the money out of the register at first and gave it to him. And he wasn't a believer at this point, but he prayed, as he says, to the great kind of void in the sky. Oh, I hope he doesn't ask for more, because they didn't give 19-year-olds with goofy hats the combination to the safe. But this guy had been watching for several weeks, said, I know there's a safe in the back behind the office on the right, etc. Brian said, sir, I don't know the combination. Can't tell you everything that occurred, the language, but you can probably fill in the blanks here. I want to be mindful of children. But it ended up where the coworker is crying. She's hysterical. Naturally, who wouldn't be? Brian's trying to keep his cool and keep himself together and keep himself calm. And the man basically threatens him with the gun nearby, that if he didn't open it, he was going to end his life. To which Brian finally said, I just kind of went for it, Craig. And said, well, then you're going to have to do that because I don't know the combination. Now, unfortunately, the man just, kind of cussed and yelled and told them to stay in the back and not come out for an hour, which he and the coworker followed to a T because they were so terrified. Now, that happened over 30 years ago. And I know that he still dreams about that event. That's one small event that would barely make a crime blotter column in a local Bel Air patch. But that was a defining moment. How many of those moments? How many acts of violence? How many broken relationships? How many people's lives that get ruined financially, relationally, criminally, over and over again? And I haven't even talked yet about wars, diseases, pain. For all of our technology, all of our advancements, one visit, one innocuous visit to a doctor's office can change our life. Do you ever feel that? That we are on the edge of pain and suffering. Now, we can pretend it's not true, and we can put rose-colored glasses on and hope for the best, or we can face it in its ugly truth and sing with the song, long lay the world in sin and error pining. Do you know, if that's your experience, whether you're a spiritual person or not, I bet all of us can tap into that sense of, man, something just seems really dark and wrong in our world. Let me now invite you with that sense of skepticism into the Scripture's diagnosis. And you notice passages like Romans 3:19. Now, we know that whatever the law says, now, all you need to know about the law is it's God's standard of right and wrong. This is what God expects, that whatever the law speaks, it speaks to those who are under the law. That's all of us. What's the effect? That every mouth may be stopped and the whole world may be held accountable to God. This is the picture of the world not just languishing, but also under indictment, divine indictment for its sin and wrongdoing. And then a couple of verses later, the leader in the early church, Paul, pens these words. For all, notice the tense, have sinned, past tense, and all, present tense, fall short of the glory of God. That means there's a standard. God's glory is his character. It's the outshining of all that he is. And all of us, what's it saying? We have blown it. Oh, good thing. I'll just turn over a new leaf. And we are in the present blowing it. And if you don't think you are, just ask your spouse to grade you according to his or her expectations. And if you get a 10 out of 10, she's lying to you. I'm telling you that, and if you don't know it, please talk to me after the service. All have sinned, past tense, and fall short of the glory of God. So why do we need Christmas? That's all I want us to get to today. We need Christmas because we have to have someone come into this languishing world and do battle with the very thing that is killing us. And do you know how the scriptures describe Christmas? It's not Norman Rockwell. It's not Victorian sentiment. It's not snow outside of a window. I love that stuff as much as anybody. It describes it in terms of militaristic phrasing. Notice what 1 John says. You know that he, that's Jesus, appeared. Why did he come? That's what Christmas is. To take away sins. And in him there is no sin. Or notice how it's said even stronger in combat terms in verse 8. The reason the Son of God appeared was to what? Destroy the works of the devil. Which leads us to ask this next question. How bad off must this world have been that Jesus had to come and engage in cosmic combat? That's why I think we have so much verbiage about how bad things are. Yeah, it kind of ruins our Christmas parties. Our Christmas playlist is going and Mariah is singing her heart out and somebody wants to drop these verses we're talking about today. Man, that's a killjoy. It's actually the setup for true joy. Because finally somebody's being honest. Things are a mess. And we need a hero to come into this mess and fix what we've broken. Which is why the language, back to Isaiah, turns militaristic here. This isn't pretty stuff. This isn't sentimental stuff. This is combat stuff. For the yoke of his burden and the staff for his shoulder, the rod of his oppressor you have broken on the day of Midian. So there's a picture of a conquering hero that's going to come and destroy those who would oppress the people. Notice verse 5. For every boot of the trampling warrior in battle tumult and every garment is rolled in blood will be burned as fuel for the fire. This is the good news. All the oppression, all the pain, there is a coming conquest that is going to slay what has slayed you. Here's today's takeaway thought. The state of the world is unthinkably bleak. Only God can fix it. We can, right? We've got it. I mean, we live in a world where, like, a guy like Steve Jobs could have come up with such amazing innovation. And we still have all these problems. We live in a world where people know multiple languages, can build satellite technologies, right? That can beam things from thousands of miles away. We live in a world where the Hubble telescope is still out there in the great void taking exceptional photographs. We live in that world, and we still are languishing because the state of the world is unthinkably bleak and only God can fix it. So let's go back to the promise here. There will be no more gloom. And notice in Zebulun, in Naphtali, that's where we started. I want you to consider something. I want to give this much of a teaser before we take communion. One of the most interesting things when you get to the New Testament, Matthew and Luke give us the Christmas stories, right? I'm not going to be giving too much of that information this Christmas because we're going to stay here in Isaiah. But many of you know it. If you don't, I'd recommend read the first two chapters of Matthew or Luke. One of the strange things about Matthew is when Jesus starts his public ministry in the 4th chapter, I expect him to go to Jerusalem. That's in the south, the capital, but he doesn't. The first thing he does when he starts his public ministry, when he heard that John, that's his cousin, had been arrested, Jesus withdrew into Galilee, and leaving Nazareth, that's his hometown, he went and lived in Capernaum, that's to the far north, by the sea, in the territory of where? Zebulun and Naphtali. So that what was spoken by the prophet Isaiah 700 years before might be fulfilled. Let's see what that is. I think you already know. We go to the next slide. The land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, the way of the sea, beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles, the people dwelling in darkness have seen a great light. And for those dwelling in the region and the shadow of death, on them a light has dawned. That's where Jesus chooses to start his public ministry. There's almost no Jewish people up in that region. There's a few. It's predominantly non-Jewish. And that's where Jesus starts his ministry. Why? Because he knows Isaiah 9. And he knows the time has come. This region that has been crushed and cursed, his feet now walk across that soil. And he does that to fulfill a promise that we who were once in darkness have seen a great light. So if we live in a world that is languishing and dying, and only God can fix it, who's the hero that we need? And this will be our series in December. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulders, and his name shall be called. Notice his qualifications. Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Who can fix the mess of this world? The one who is Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Now we're going to end our time by taking communion. It's interesting. This service has kind of been the beginning of the story, and now I want you to fast forward with me all the way to the end. Jesus is this Wonderful Counselor. He is the Mighty God. He is the Everlasting Father. Jesus said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. He is the Prince of Peace. He's the one who comes to crush what was crushing us. How would he slay that dragon? By offering up his life. That's how he would ultimately go into hand-to-hand combat against the forces arrayed against us. So when we take communion this morning, we're not merely remembering that, around 30 AD, this carpenter named Jesus did this nice thing and for some reason needed to die for us. We can go much higher level. We can go to the 30,000-foot view and say, this is the one who was promised that would come and rescue us from the dilemma this world is in. He would go right to the source of it, and he would take our sin upon himself so that he could kill its power and give us his love and his grace so that the people who were walking in darkness would see a great light and know that our hope is found in him. I'm going to pray for our time. The ushers, as we sing this wonderful song, Jesus, Son of God, will pass out the trays. If you would take the cup and the bread and hold them for a moment while we sing this song together. Stay in your seats and sing. I'll be up in a moment and we'll take communion. But let's ask God one more time for his touch. Lord, touch our hearts. The state of the world is unthinkably bleak. Only you could fix it, and you did. You sent your son. You didn't have to, but you did. He didn't have to come. We didn't deserve it, but he did. If you had left us in our darkness, who could say that you were unjust? No one. But you sent him just the same. We thank you for him. May this meal that we take fill us with joy. And may you soften our hearts to say this Christmas, I'm going to take my time and consider every one of his wonderful names. So I can tell my family, my children, my neighbors, my coworkers, who is this one who's changed my life? Help us do this with thankfulness in our hearts in Jesus' name.